So I call this meeting to order at 5:34. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance Committee. I have some brief housekeeping announcements I must make. Please note the location of the fire exits. Please could everyone here present make sure that their mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent. This meeting is being live streamed and an audio recording being made, so please speak clearly, and please switch your microphone on and speak clearly when addressing the committee. So, to business. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies for the absence of our Chair Belinda Waters and Councillor John Campbell. Any others to note? No? Excellent. So, to the second item. There are the minutes of two previous meetings to be considered for approval. So, first of all, the committee is asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November 2023 as a correct record. Do I have a proposer who was present at that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Bevis. And a seconder. So, I believe Councillor Clark, you were there. Thank you so much. That's great. All in favour? Thank you. There we go. And the committee is also asked to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of May 2024 as a correct record. Do I have a proposer for that? Thank you, Councillor Vickers. And a seconder, Councillor Boffey. Thank you. All in favour? Excellent. That's agreed. Thank you. Announcements. There are no announcements from the Chair or from the Monitoring Officer, so we can proceed to item 4, Declaration of Members' Interests. Does any member of the committee have an interest to declare in respect of any item on the agenda? No? Thank you. Wonderful. So, to the meat of the matter, item number 5, appointment of an unparished area committee. I shall now hand over to the Monitoring Officer to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. By way of background, most residents in the Horsham district lived in areas which are served by parish councils. These councils issue a precept to provide certain services. By contrast, however, some residents live in areas which are not served by parish councils. These areas extend to the wards of Den, Forest and Trafalgar, and parts of Holbrook West and Roffey South wards. Consequently, this area is served by 3 neighbourhood councils which do not have the power to issue the precept. Instead, relevant council taxpayers pay what's known as a special charge, which funds the neighbourhood councils and certain activities. In reality, however, most of the special charge is retained by this district council, as the neighbourhood councils are non-statutory bodies which do not enjoy the same spending powers. As such, this report recommends the creation of an unparished area committee to advise in 2 respects. First, in relation to the computation of the special charge, and second, in relation to any other matters affecting the unparished area. It is proposed that this committee is made up of, first, all members for the wards which are situated wholly in an unparished area. Second, 1 member for each ward situated partly in an unparished area. And third, 1 co-opted representative from each of the 3 neighbourhood councils. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, it falls to me to open this matter for debate. Would any members like to offer any observations or contributions? Councillor Boffey.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, I just wanted to note that this coming forward follows on from the Governance Peer Challenge that we had at the beginning of this year, and one of the items that we were asked as a council to consider off the back of that was the governance arrangements in the unparished area, because they felt that, well, they mainly said that that was something that needed to be examined. I think you might have some references to the points that they made, but a lot of it was around, obviously, to do with the governance considerations, given that a substantial amount of money is raised essentially from those residents, but it's how it's spent is determined by the council as a whole. I've been, which is okay for me to say, I've been in touch with the neighbourhood councils. I've had responses back from two of them who are broadly happy with these proposals. There was a question from one neighbourhood council which I might ask if the monitoring officer can comment on in a moment, which is as to whether the quorum would include the co-opted members or not. I think one neighbourhood council had some slight concerns that didn't go into details, but around the wording of the terms of reference towards the end, but they were comfortable that the terms of reference are going to be kept under review as we get into the first period. They're also concerned that on the limitation of only meeting twice a year, but I think, you know, if there is scope to call an additional meeting if that is warranted or needed, but that was their concern anyway. And yes, those were the main points that were raised. On review of it, I mean, I think it's a good idea. But on review, I did sort of think there's a couple of possible issues. One being if any of the neighbourhood council representatives are not able to make a meeting, then they wouldn't have anyone else there. So I wonder if there could be provision for them to be able to send a substitute from within their number. And also, as we only have one member each sitting from Holbrook West and Roffey South, if they are unable to attend, whether the other member might be able to attend in their stead. But apart from that, I don't have any issues with the proposals, and I think it would be a good step forward. Thank you.
So, Councillor Boffey, as I understand it, that might require a minor amendment to the proposal.
That would be my understanding, but I mean, I will move that as and when required, but I'm happy to let the debate
that's fine. So
first.
we shall table that for the moment and then return to it if need be. So I invite any other members to offer things. Councillor Clark, thank you.
Thanks. I read this with some interest. I mean, I certainly found the second point in here understandable, and about cabinet members. The question I was actually raised in my mind was, should a cabinet member sit on this at all, in view of their role in cabinet and policy and directing the things that are done in Horsham? Just question whether, when a member is sitting on this parish area committee, whether one should exclude cabinet members entirely or not. It's just a thought, just a question.
I'd invite the monitoring officer if they have an opinion on this. Or...
Thank you, Chair. I think two questions rest with me presently. The first raised by Councillor Boffey in relation to the quorum. As presently drafted in Appendix A, the quorum extends to all members of that committee, so it would include indeed the co-opted members and non-voting members. And in relation to Councillor Clark's query, there is a provision in Appendix A which reads as follows: any cabinet member sitting on the committee shall not participate in any item in relation to which they are a cabinet member being advised, and that is so as to avoid a conflict of interest and to put them in the unable position of being essentially advising themselves. So I hope that goes part way to allay any fears, but I'd welcome any further thoughts in that regard.
If I may, I mean, it does partly allay any concerns, but having sat in cabinet myself and participated in cabinet, I do wonder whether that option or that exclusion should apply to all cabinet members, because cabinet members talk very much amongst themselves and formulate policy as a group. And so, whilst I understand the exclusion on the topic relating to the cabinet portfolio that person is working on or responsible for, I just wonder whether that should be extended to the whole of the cabinet. That's why I raised the point.
Councillor Bevis and then Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, if I could just come in on Councillor Clark's point. I'm sympathetic with what he's saying. I think, you know, there ought to be a distinct difference between the executive cabinet and the backbench members. But the problem I see is that both of the members from Roffey South are cabinet members. So, you know, I think we might have to use the word fudge in this case.
Councillor Vickers, did you wish to?
Just a slightly different. Can the monitoring officer just clarify what decision-making power this committee has in terms of making decisions that obviously affect the unparished areas? So does that committee make the final decision, or does it have to go somewhere else after? That's clear.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. This body is being constituted in a solely advisory capacity, so it has no decision-making powers. It will purely advise the Cabinet member or the Cabinet as a whole in relation to any activity that they wish to pursue. And returning to both Councillor Clark and Councillor Bevis's queries, should you wish to exclude a Cabinet member entirely from sitting on such a committee, then it is open to you in this meeting to put forward an amendment to that proposal.
Councillor Emery.
Thank you. The monitoring, could you just provide clarification in terms of the consultation? Would the consultation then lead to a decision made at Cabinet or a decision made by the full Council?
That would depend on the scheme of delegation contained in the Council's constitution. So, for example, if the item is in relation to the special charge and the computation thereof, they would advise the Cabinet member, and then the Cabinet member would have to have regard to the rules in our constitution relating to budget proposals, and that would be put forward for a cabinet decision. So essentially it depends on the agenda item as to where that decision is made, either by a Cabinet member individually or Cabinet collectively.
Thank you. So basically, so for the financial perspective and the setting of budgets would remain the responsibility of the Cabinet.
Like to be Cabinet,
but any
yes.
constitutional change in terms of the creation and the powers that were created through the assumption that would go to Council. So the non-financial decisions.
In relation to a matter which is brought before the Unparished Area Committee,
Yes.
I can't see that anything would go up to full Council. It would usually sit with the Cabinet member or the Cabinet collectively.
I was just looking to see what the accountability would be for the overall Council as opposed to purely responsibility to being made to the Cabinet with regard to Councillor Clark issue of a potential conflict.
Councillor Clark.
Well, basically, as the monitoring officer said, essentially this doesn't have a power decision, it's a consultative body that then feeds back to Cabinet. The point about having Cabinet members sitting on a consultative committee is you're going around little loops. What's the point of them sitting on that consultative committee? They should be excluded because they're consulting for themselves, if you see what I'm trying to say. So I would suggest that this be modified to exclude Cabinet members. The fact that today it causes a practical problem is irrelevant. We're talking of the Council as a whole, not today's administration.
Councillor Boffey.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I understand and take Councillor Clark's point. However, there is a contra problem to it in that maybe I can be selfish for a moment, but you know I've served on one of the neighbourhood councils for 6 years. I've chaired it for 2 of them. I have rather a lot to bring to the table, and I'm sure other members do as well. It's also a point to say that one of the reasons that this came about is looking at the special charge and tax levying powers and accountability for that. Now, as district councillors, we're all elected, so it's bringing that electoral accountability to it. Whilst I have the deepest respect for the neighbourhood councils, and they do a very important job, which I highly value, but I'm not sure when the last time, if ever, there was a contested election in the unparished area. And when we're talking about effectively feeding into a levied precept, I think it's important to have people who are actually accountable to their residents. I'm capable of noting that there's potential conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest, but I can say I'm quite comfortable being able to put that aside when it comes to considering these matters, and I take it from other members that they are able to as well. So I wouldn't support such a change personally. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Councillor Croker, I shall come to you in just a moment. I thought it might be helpful. Councillor Boffey alluded to some comments from the Local Governance Association's peer challenge review that was conducted in February of this year, related to some of the matters that you were just mentioning. So I thought perhaps it would be useful to read the relevant comments, which are available at page 6 of that document, on paragraph 2. Finally, Horsham District Council is aware of the issue regarding the position of the unparished town of Horsham Town Centre area, the result of which means that they are less connected to the council, and the council is less accountable to the community on how funds paid by the community are spent and distributed in council spending. It is recommended that a review to consider options for this area be conducted. So I think that was specifically to the part to which you were referring, and your arguments were towards that matter of accountability. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Croker, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. I think whilst I understand Councillor Clark's point, as councillors, we're experienced in, if I can say, wearing different hats from time to time. And I think this is a case where I would expect a cabinet member to be able to remove his cabinet hat at these meetings. You shake your head, and I appreciate that's a matter of opinion. So I'm inclined to support Councillor Boffey on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Bevis, did you have a further comment there?
Yeah, very briefly, Chair. Yeah, thinking about it, I'm also inclined not to support Councillor Clark. This whole recommendation will be reviewed regularly. So I think if it's seen that having cabinet members on this committee is causing a problem, then that could be brought back to governance, and we can consider it and hopefully make a different approach in future.
Considering those comments now in the debate, Councillor Clark, was there an amendment that you wish to move, or any further comment that you wish to make at this point?
The comment is a practical one. How would you determine that it is a problem? I mean, I hear what you say, but when you look at it practically, how are you going to determine it? I still think that the separation of powers is important and scrutiny is important. The fact that you don't include cabinet members in this committee does not take away the scrutiny, and it does not take away the elected members participating in the decisions. All it does is separate clearly the distinctive powers that the cabinet has and cabinet members have. And I hear the story of multiple hats, but well, fine. I just remain sceptical on that.
So, as I understand it, you're not moving any amendment at this time. So, but I believe that Councillor Boffey intends to. So, perhaps we shall move to that now.
I believe the monitoring officer may have some suggestions as to how we might amend to reflect the points I made earlier around substitutes.
Thank you. If members care to turn to page 15 of their agenda, Appendix A, it reads, first of all, proposed membership. And the first paragraph I propose is amended as follows. So this is the present wording. All members of the wards which are situated wholly in the unparished area of Horsham Town, and one member for each ward that is situated partly in the unparished area of Horsham Town, and this is where the amendment comes in, provided that a member of a part unparished area may appoint a member from the same ward to act in their absence. So that would provide for a substitute in relation to that part. And then in relation to the fourth paragraph, I suggest that it reads as follows. This is the present wording. Co-opted members of the committee shall not have voting rights, and I suggest this is added. and may appoint a substitute representative to act in their absence, again providing for a substitute in that connection. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could propose that those amendments be made.
Excellent. So we have a proposed amendment in the wording that has just been helpfully provided by the monitoring officer. Is there a seconder to that? All in favour? So, all in favour of that amendment? We return to the debate. Are there any further comments or amendments to be made? Otherwise, I'll move to a vote on the substantive proposal as amended. Do I have a proposer for?
Yes, I'll propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Bofford. And a seconder? Councillor Emin. So, all those in favour then of adopting the recommendations as stated on page 9 of the agenda and amended in this meeting? So the motion is carried. Apologies, I believe I might have misspoken there. Did I say item 9 when I meant page 9 of the agenda? Thank you. There we are. So, we move on to the next agenda item, item 6, local ward member speaking rights, and I shall hand over to the monitoring officer again to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, as members are aware, the Council has 2 geographically based planning committees and all members sit on a planning committee unless they opt out of doing so. Presently, the Constitution does not allow for opted out members to speak on applications in their ward. As illustrated in Appendix A to this report, our neighbouring local authorities allow non-planning committee members to speak at planning committee. As such, members are asked this evening to consider whether opted out ward members should be entitled to speak on applications in their ward for up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monitoring Officer. Briefly to note from the Chair that in reading the minutes for the meeting of the 27th of November 2023 of this committee, at which I was sadly not present, in regard to a discussion of the planning committee and how that is constituted, the minutes state concern was expressed in relation to how the views of local residents would continue to be represented on a planning committee comprised of a fewer number of members. And I think that this report and recommendation might speak directly to those concerns. So I invite members to offer their points and questions. Councillor Vickers.
It's a very brief question, Chairman, thank you. I wasn't present, obviously, in November. I didn't obviously realise until I came back here that some members had opted out of planning committees. Obviously, up until then, everybody sat on one. Can you just clarify for me how many members have opted out and whether that has caused any issues in terms of representation so far at committee?
So I shall refer to the monitoring officer for some information on this.
Thank you. I believe it's circa 7 members having opted out thus far, and it hasn't caused any issues yet because they're only opting out now. So we're trying to put this in place going forward off that scenario. Thank you.
I should also note that there are many wards which have more than one member representing. So, as I understand it, there have not been any situations so far where an item has come to Planning Committee North, on which I sit, at which a member has not been present in the committee representing a ward in which a matter has arisen, though I stand to be clarified on that recollection. But this would explicitly provide for the opportunity for local members to speak, regardless of that the situation. So, Councillor Croker, please, and then Councillor Boffin. Or Oh, sorry. I apologise. I thought I saw that. In which case, Councillor Croker and then Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the papers for this meeting today, I decided to dig back a bit, and I went back to the April 2019 council meeting, where the decision was made to, in effect, allow members to opt out. And I'm afraid I still don't understand it. I'm wondering whether some of the members on this committee now who were actually present at that meeting might be able to explain it, because it seems to me we've just dug ourselves a hole and we're keeping on digging. So I'll ask other members if they have recollections. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Croker. I was not present at that meeting, and if there are councillors who were present at the meeting and have any recollections, they may comment, but obviously some time has passed since then and matters will have moved on significantly. But if any councillors do recall and wish to comment, I'm sure they have the opportunity to do so. Councillor Clark, thank you.
I've read the papers. I mean, basically all we're looking to do is change nothing to the basic principles of what we're doing. All we're doing is allowing members who are not members of the planning committee to come and speak, as I understand it. That's all we're doing, right?
Only ward members in relation to applications in their ward.
Councillor Bevis.
Yeah, a couple of points, Chairman. I wonder whether we ought to have something in here about members that have an interest who speak at the beginning of the debate on a particular application and then recuse themselves from the rest of the debate. And I think that's a separate issue to members that are or are not on the committee. So I just wonder whether other members feel that that might be significant and should be separate to what's in here. The other point is that the proposed 9B, local ward members must notify the chairman of the relevant planning committee of their intention to speak. I'm not sure, I mean, no one notifies the chairman of any intention to speak at either of the planning committees, to my knowledge. So I don't quite understand what this is seeking to do. And I suppose the third point I question is, I hadn't realised that there was a time limit of 5 minutes at planning committee. Most people don't talk for 5 minutes, but you do sometimes get quite long, complicated, contentious applications that, especially if you're the local member, you can't really do justice to it in 5 minutes. And if you're going to require more than 5 minutes, then possibly other members are too. So I'm sorry if that's sort of extending the scope of this recommendation, but it does seem to me that planning is a different animal to most of the other things we do in the council, and trying to have a one-size-fits-all 5 minute limit really doesn't sort of sit comfortably.
So I believe the monitoring officer might like to come back on a couple of points, but I imagine other members will have their views on the relevance of some of these things, but I thought perhaps if there were any comments the monitoring officer might make in response to some of those questions. Right, okay, so in which case I will allow other members to continue to contribute to the debate. So Councillor Boffey first and then Councillor Emery. Thank you. And Councillor Clark, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things that I'm not sure if I quite got exactly what Councillor Bevis was saying, but I suppose the reason normally no members don't have to advise democratic services that they want to speak at planning committees, because invariably they're on the planning committee, so we'll be there, and so we'll be able to take part in the debate. Although I don't know whether we always require members who are not on other committees to advise that they're coming in order to speak. Sometimes they're able to just come, and at chairman's discretion they're allowed to speak. But I suppose if you're actually wanting to get a slot, then that's a slightly different. So I don't really have a problem with needing to advise that you're coming, so to speak. And I do think it's important to make sure that that there is a gap here. It's partly why this is here, but I think it is important to allow members to speak on an item in their ward if they wish to do so, notwithstanding that they're not actually on the committee. And from a practical point of view, if you didn't, there'd be nothing to stop them taking one of the other speakers' slots to come and speak, which would then reduce the extent to which members of the public might be able to come and use the time. So it guards against that. However, on the point about the 5 minutes, well, having been on quite a few planning committees, I think they might be improved by members sticking to 5 minutes in the debate quite a lot of the time. And I also think that if you're going to opt not to be on planning committee, as I have myself, it's reasonable to expect that comes at a price, which is that you only get 5 minutes rather than as long as you want. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Boffey. So, noted, Councillor Vickers, you have your hand up. Councillor Emery?
Thank you. In respect to the point that Councillor Beavis made, can I suggest that we amend that clause accordingly so it makes it clear that is members who have opted not to join the planning committee must give notice to the committee that they wish to attend and speak? Because I think that's where the lack of clarity exists. So if we can amend that accordingly. I'm also mindful of the 5 minute rule and the need for brevity. However, as we've seen from the feedback sessions that many of us have just attended, we do need to have reasonable debate, and we do need to ensure that we have strong defensible positions. So therefore I think and I also noted that some of the chairmen of the committee say that they don't enforce the 5 minute rule, and so I think it is, I suggest we leave it as it is and leave it to the discretion of the committee chair as to whether they enforce the 5 minute rule, or indeed the rule to allow a further intervention to be made by a member of the planning committee, or indeed the representative who is not a member of the planning committee but who wishes to speak.
So I'm going to allow the debate to continue a little bit. If there is an amendment that you wish to kind of propose at the end of that, when people have had the opportunity to speak, then we could return to that at that point.
If I may, Chair, Councillor Emery, may I clarify, were you saying that you would like to see local ward members notifying the chairman in advance of attending the planning committee?
Apologies, sorry. Appendix B on page 25,
Yeah.
Subsection 9, local ward members speaking at meetings. I think that needs to be amended to make it clear that it is local ward members who are not existing planning committee members who wish to speak at meetings.
Because limb A of that says all local ward members shall be entitled to speak on applications within their ward, including any that have opted out of sitting on planning committee. So
Yes,
would you like the first
but
thing of that deleted?
the issue is point 9b, which would otherwise require all ward members to notify the chairman if they wish to speak. And that's
okay.
to cease to stop happening. Yes, absolutely.
And was that the point that you were intending to raise as well, Councillor Clark?
It was one of 2 points.
Okay, well, thank you.
In that case, then it may be prudent if you put forward a proposal saying in B, prior to the words, opted out local ward members must notify the chairman.
Yes.
Satisfied with that. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. All those in favour? Okay, so the proposal is so amended to reflect that, and we can return, I think, to the substantive debate. So, Councillor Clark, your second point.
That was more elegantly worded than what I'd written, I'll put it that way. The other issue is, of course, that board members who sit on the planning committee can vote on the planning committee thing, but that is not covered in this amendment. So it doesn't specifically say that members of the ward who are not on the planning committee therefore cannot vote on that either. Or does it not matter?
I would have thought ordinarily that the language opted out of the planning committee would make clear that they are no longer a voting member of that committee, and that speaking at a committee obviously does not implicitly suggest that one has a right to vote in it as members of the public, but obviously this is a question for the monitoring officer to clarify.
Your understanding is correct, Chairman.
Excellent. So, Councillor Vickers.
I was just going to say exactly that, Chairman. My concern was about voting membership. I just think it may cause some confusion to members of the public present, that one member of the ward votes and the other one doesn't. And I don't know how that can be explained. It might look like they're abstaining on it, because they won't necessarily know that that person is not a member of that committee.
So again, without wanting to preempt the monitoring officer, but my understanding would be that them addressing that committee would be as it is with a non-voting member of any committee addressing any other committee outside of planning. And I do recognise, as I'm sure you do, that planning attracts perhaps a greater level of public interest and engagement, but it is fairly clear at those planning committee meetings that I've attended whom is speaking and addressing the committee and making a statement, and who is forming part of the voting committee in the debate, and that is made clear by both where they are sat in the room and also by the chairman's introduction of them, an invitation for them to speak. So hopefully that will be clear, but is my understanding correct in that?
Your understanding is correct, Chairman. Should Councillor Vickers wish, you could put forward a proposal to amend this recommendation contained in Appendix B, and you could add a further limb, D, saying for the avoidance of doubt, opted out ward members, should they exercise their speaking rights pursuant to this provision, shall not be entitled to vote.
I would welcome that, Chairman, if that's possible, simply because I have not attended a meeting where somebody who's opted out has actually been to speak, so I haven't seen that in process, but I think the suggestion from the monitoring officer makes perfect sense.
Well, if you'd like to propose that and have a seconder.
Yep.
There we go. So proposed by Councillor Vickers and seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favour of adding a further item D to reflect that? And yes, that is so amended. So back to the substantive debate with those two amendments noted. Is that?
That's
So
it, thank you,
noted.
Chairman. And on a non-operational level as well, the chairman of the relevant planning committee can also make it known to the committee in the public gallery that even though a local ward member is exercising their rights, they're actually not entitled to vote. So that can be scripted in.
Yes, and I think that such clarifications to the public, as we often need to make, are terribly helpful. So, Councillor Boffey.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I can't resist being a bit of a pedant, but I don't have any issues with the extra limb being put in there. But it's always, if you're not on a committee, you can't vote on a committee. That's quite straightforward. But also, I think Councillor Wicks has made the correct point at the end. The important thing isn't so much whether that's written in the Constitution. The important thing is what the people who come to planning committee see happen and whether they understand it. And that duty lies much more squarely both with the chairman to make that clear, and it can possibly be covered in the scripting or whatever of when that member is called to come and speak on what basis they are doing so, and also quite possibly simply on where they sit. Like I would expect that they probably would not be sitting at the committee table. They would be speaking from the speaker's mic rather than from the committee table, and then they retreat. And that's sort of kind of a practical point. I don't know whether the committee officers seems to want to make a response on that one. No, fine, okay, excellent. There's another point I just wanted to come back to. Councillor Bevis raised the point some time ago around members who step back from the committee on a given item and wish to make a statement. I'm kind of 50-50 on this one, really, because we're managing this. This does happen at the moment, but then equally, does it need to be tidied up and put into writing? I don't know, but it's just to reassure the point that there are instances on which this happens at the moment, and it's done. I don't know whether it's done as of right, monitoring officer, or whether it's done at chairman's discretion, or what, as in.
I believe it's chairman's discretion.
Okay, so I guess there's a question there around whether we see this as a risk or not. As I say, I'm kind of 50-50 on it, but I didn't want it to get forgotten in this debate.
So, Councillor Croker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on that point, actually, when it happened at Planning South recently, I was quite surprised because of the effect it had. In this case, it was a statement read out, and it gained a considerable degree of prominence, I thought, in the debate that I was quite uncomfortable with at the time. So it's an interesting area.
So, relevant to this, it is within my discretion as chairman to allow a statement from a person who is present but not a member of the committee. Councillor Ruth Fletcher is here present and has indicated that she might like to address the committee. I'm willing to hear what she has to say.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I'm broadly in favour of this. I just wondered whether members of the committee might like to consider the fact that sometimes there are planning applications where the ward itself is less affected than, for example, an adjacent ward by a particular development. And I wondered whether they might like to consider adding an amendment at the chairman's discretion to allowing another ward member who had an interest, or maybe not need those words, another ward member to speak as well in that sort of situation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fletcher, for that contribution. Yes, this does seem to be a relevant consideration. There have been some items that have come to Planning Committee quite recently, which involved applications that concerned areas which were very much on the border between different ward areas and would therefore affect local members on both sides of that. And in fact, in that instance, unfortunately, I was affected. I was unwell and unable to attend that committee meeting, and my fellow ward member is one of those who has opted out. So I would have intended to speak, and I was comfortable in the committee well representing and considering things, but yes, I think this is something that is worth consideration. Councillor Vickers.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Monitoring Officer, but I've heard in the past members of a planning committee reading out a statement from somebody who was absent, who was a member of that committee.
Yes, I believe that has happened in the past.
So I think the question for members to consider then is whether or not they feel that the instance that Councillor Vickers has just mentioned would allow sufficient opportunity, or whether some proposal along the lines that Councillor Fletcher invited us to consider might be necessary. Councillor Croker.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Councillor Fletcher, sorry, for making that point. It was something I was going to raise. And just to point out, I did say we're digging ourselves a hole here. I think it's got a bit deeper. A bigger, deeper, whatever, yeah. And I'm not really sure the easy way out of it at this stage. We've got to cover a possible way out later on in this meeting. At the moment, I'm somewhat conflicted, shall we say. Thank you.
So, Councillor Boffey.
I was just wondering, I take the point that it's the whole getting a bit deeper, but I think not doing anything probably I'm not saying anyone's suggesting that, but not doing something is probably not the right answer. And I think, we can do something now, and in principle we can do something later if it doesn't work. And also the Constitution review hopefully will clarify a lot of this when it comes forward. I just wanted to have a question around, we set this out, but then, because I think it's an improvement on where we are without necessarily being ideal, but is there still chairman's discretion in planning committee potentially to allow a member from an adjacent committee, an adjacent ward or some such to speak, or would that be just not possible and it really has to be in the Constitution to allow it? I don't know. That's more of a question really for the monitoring officer, or is it something we really need to nail down now?
Monitoring officer, is that something that you feel you can comment on that?
I think this is a fairly complex and technical area, and I think if members can come up with a solution this evening, that would be beneficial. I think the Constitution is largely silent on this, and I think in the past, conventionally, we have relied on chairman's discretion.
Yes, Councillor Emma.
So, thank you, Chairman. If the Constitution is silent on this, and therefore it is purely at the discretion of the Chairman, then presumably that would then mean that a ward councillor, in the context of the comments made by Councillor Fletcher, would have the discretion to participate as a non-voting attendee at the planning meeting. That would resolve this issue. Or indeed one could follow the suggestion made by Councillor Vickers, which is that a written statement could be made by. So I suppose my question is, without wishing to dig any deeper, do we actually have solutions within the Constitution which provide a permitted way around this at this time, bearing in mind the point made by Councillor Boffey that there will be a full constitutional review being undertaken?
Councillor Vickers.
Just a point of notice, I think on one occasion a member from the Southern Committee came and spoke at the Northern Committee, and that was at the Chairman's discretion, and it was perfectly accepted. So whether it actually needs to be written in at this point, I don't necessarily think so.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Yes, I was going to suggest that because we have a division in this district between a Planning Committee North and a Planning Committee South, there will likely have been occasions where it has been necessary to have some flexibility or facility to allow input from somebody from one committee to another one, and that necessarily, if the Constitution was silent, would have relied upon some flexibility and discretion from the chairman. And while I think we all would appreciate, and I'm sure the public would likely appreciate, some greater clarity within the Constitution as this, I think that the process before us goes some way to addressing that and reducing the amount of the slack that is currently having to be picked up by chairman's discretion, which, while I think has been sufficient to avoid major problems in the heretofore, is obviously something that we'll want to address further, but won't necessarily have the opportunity to fully clarify, I think, on the fly this evening. So unless anyone is bringing forward any further amendments, I would suggest that we return to the substantive motion in front of us. Is there a proposer for that motion as currently? So Councillor Vickers proposing, and do we have a seconder? So Councillor Bothy seconding. All those in favour then of adopting the recommendation that has been amended. So, sorry, do I have to move this one? Yes, that's cool. That's excellent. Sorry. Just clarifying that I got the wording right. So, adopting the recommendation as amended. All those in favour? So, any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. So, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to exercise my discretion in allowing Councillor Croker to read that written statement. And thank you very much for your time, Councillor Bevis. We note that Councillor Bevis is now leaving this meeting at 6:25 p.m. Hopefully Councillor Croker can read Councillor Bevis's writing. Excellent. Right, well, if there is a need to amend the minutes at some point later, that's a bridge we will jump off when we come to it. So, on to the next item of business, agenda point 7, establishment of constitutional review working group. I shall now hand over to our monitoring officer to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, the recent peer governance review recommended a review of the Council's constitution. Therefore, this report is recommending that a working group be established to facilitate this piece of work. As such, the report recommends the following members be a party to that working group: Councillor Martin Boffey as leader, Councillor Philip Circus as Conservative Group Leader, Councillor Mike Croker as Green Group Leader, Councillor Paul Clark as Chairman to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Dennis Livingstone as Chairman to the Audit Committee, and Councillors Belinda Waters and James Brooks as Chair and Vice Chair to the Governance Committee. The report recommends that this working group is composed of those members in order that there is political group representation and oversight from a risk, governance and scrutiny perspective. In terms of officers, the report recommends the assistance of both myself as monitoring officer and Bradley Damon as governance assistant, albeit the funding for his post is subject to full council approval on the 17th of July. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, councillors. Councillor Clark. Excellent. Any councillors who wish to contribute anything else? Oh, excellent. Let's have Councillor Bevis's statement then. Thank you very much, Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. So, because of the size of the task in reviewing the Constitution, would it be possible to get progress reports before the full proposal comes back to the Governance Committee?
So, I'm not entirely sure from whom those progress reports should emanate, but Councillor Boffey.
I would imagine that as it's a monitoring officer-led review, presumably that report might come from that update might come from the monitoring officer, if that would be appropriate. Just to state in an interim update report at point or points in the process.
Is that something that the monitoring officer feels acceptable? Excellent. So I don't feel that requires any amendment of the proposal before us, but I think can certainly be facilitated as part of this process. So, if there are no, sorry, Councillor Clark. Yeah, no, what I was doing. So, excellent, marvellous. In which case, I move the recommendations as stated on page 27 of the agenda be adopted. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Agenda point 8, urgent business. There is no urgent business, and that concludes the business of this meeting. So I therefore declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.